back to the Minnesota Freedom Show. I am joined by Greg Joseph. And Greg Joseph, what do you do? Why are you here?
I'm glad to be here. I'm an attorney.
We're glad you're here too.
Yeah, good to be here. I represent the Minnesota Voters Alliance, and I litigate election integrity issues, among other things.
Okay, well, I've been out on the campaign trail a lot, and a lot of people are bringing up election integrity. It is very important to a lot of people. I've even had people say to me, "Why does it matter? Our elections aren't secure." So talk to me like I'm a small dog. Well, actually, okay, let me tell you a story. In 2008, we left Minnesota. I became a Maryland resident, and then we moved to Florida. I was a Florida resident. I was a Connecticut resident. So I was here for 12 years. Moved back in 2020 and went to vote in the election. And I showed up, and I walked in, and I told them my name is Matt Birk, and I handed them my ID, and they said, "Oh no, we don't need an ID." And I thought, really? Is that what we're talking about, the election integrity? We still don't have voter ID in Minnesota.
Right. So, yeah, you've touched on something pretty important, but let's just say that elections in Minnesota have been a mess for a very long time. And I think it's mostly because people just haven't been paying attention to what's going on. But that's changing very, very quickly. I mentioned to you we had this Supreme Court case in March that really shined the light on a major problem, and not just in the metro area, but across the state. And it has to do with who decides whether a ballot counts or not. And something happened in March that is going to make things a lot more balanced and fair when it comes to counting ballots.
Well, what happened? Tell us what happened.
Great question.
You're just keeping me in suspense,
Okay.
Greg. Way to tease me.
All right. So the law is set up so that election judges make the decision whether a ballot counts or not. And there's a big body of law. There's like 5 statutes touching on election judges. What do election judges have to be? First of all, they have to be party balanced. Okay, that's the biggest thing. They have to be the age of majority. They have to be able to read and write the English language, basic things like that. But the most important aspect is the party balance part. Okay, so all these statutes are written to make sure that election judges are doing the counting and the accepting and rejecting of ballots. But there's this one little sentence that throws everything into turmoil. It wrecks the whole thing. And it says, oh, but you can also use deputy city clerks or deputy county auditors to do that. Problem is, nobody knows what a deputy city clerk or deputy county auditor is.
I don't.
Right. So we'll cut to the chase. The door's been opened, and certain cities like the one we're standing in used nothing but deputy city clerks to do the accepting and rejecting. And guess what? Deputy city clerks don't have to be party balanced. So what happened in March? What happened in March was the Supreme Court said, wait a minute, okay, you have to have enough election judges to be able to decide whether these signatures match on these ballots. And if they don't match, it's got to go.
Okay.
So now we're going to have party balance in the counting rooms on the ballot boards where it matters the most.
Well,
that's new.
Okay, that sounds like good news. But I've also heard that last election, volunteers at the polls, the Democrats outnumbered Republicans in Minnesota 6-1, 7-1 statewide. So is it important that people, I mean, a lot of people say, hey, I want to get involved, I want to do something. Is it important that Republicans volunteer to be election judges, poll challengers, those types of things?
Critical. And it's critical, and they are. They are. That's the great news. The great news is that since this happened in March, since we got that decision in March, we've been writing letters to some of these counties who staff these ballot boards, who decide whether they're going to be election judges or deputies on the ballot boards, to tell them, hey, you got to have enough election judges on the ballot board to accept and reject these ballots when it comes to signature matching. And they're doing it. These counties are calling back and saying, how do we do this the right way? How can we staff these ballot boards the right way? And to give you an idea of whether it matters or not, these are the people who are deciding whether the votes count. 58% of votes in the last election were absentee. 58%.
58%. The last election in Minnesota.
2020. Correct. Okay. In Minnesota. 58%
okay.
in Minnesota. Right. So it's a big deal, and people are waking up, and it's an extremely positive thing.
Well, that's good. And yeah. I mean, again, it's like, why is this some kind of partisan issue, right? Because in 2020, of course, a lot of Republicans didn't feel good about the presidential election. And, when water mains are breaking, or there's 140,000 votes are being dumped at 3 a.m., you can understand why people are skeptical. But you can go back to 2016, And Democrats didn't feel good about the presidential election. Shoot, I can remember when I was just sort of paying attention back in 2000 when the presidential, we were talking about hanging chads down in Florida, right? So why is election integrity partisan? I mean, to me, it feels like that there's laws are set up a certain way where a certain party, seems like the Democrats, have been able to manipulate the laws or the process and tilt the balance in their favor. But I think what you're saying now is in Minnesota, we can feel better. We can feel pretty good about this election coming up with some of the things that have happened.
Right. And again, with this sort of waking up, okay, comes, for example, each party has to furnish a list to these counties and cities of people that could be election judges. Okay, so the Republican Party furnishes a list to Hennepin County and says, these folks can be election judges. And then the Democrat Party does the same thing. The DFL says, these are our guys to be election judges. Okay, and the idea is they're supposed to pick from those lists. Well, the Republicans didn't really do that until this last election in earnest. Again, they're awake now. So the party is furnishing these lists to all the counties and all the municipalities across the state. And so we've got people at the table, we've got people in the room who are making these decisions now, whereas that didn't happen before.
Republicans are awake, not woke. Awake now.
Correct.
There's a difference.
Correct.
So again, I mean, it's always critically important. We hear about it every election cycle to get out and vote, exercise your constitutional right, and fair and free elections are the cornerstone, the foundation of any democracy.
Right. And once we get too far, I mean, before we forget how much time we got left, but I want to mention too, what can
show. We can do whatever we want.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
What can people do? Okay, how can people get involved? Okay.
Yes.
What can people do? They can volunteer to be election judges. Okay. But don't just be an election judge. I mean, I'm not talking about people who hand out stickers that say I voted. They do a great job too. I'm not knocking them. But they want to be election judges who are on the absentee ballot board, who make the decision whether to accept or reject a ballot. They want to be in the room. Okay. Be annoying. Volunteer, contact your county commissioners, whatever, get in their face and tell them what you want to do.
And have friends in the room too, because when you do want to challenge, if there's 6 of them and 1 of you, you're going to get just kind of dismissed and overruled.
Yes. Go with a handful of people. Okay. No question.
All right. That's great to know. Well, that's great. That's great. Hopefully everybody listening feels good about this upcoming election, feels good about some of the progress that Minnesota has made. And I think we'll probably be talking about this forever because we're always going to be tweaking and making sure that our elections are as fair as possible.
It's going to be a fun fall.
Yeah. Thank you, Greg. All right.
Yeah.
Minnesota Freedom Show will continue